You need day to day or month to month. You need somebody at the top to be sitting on these calls and making sure that the directive is getting heard by the people who can execute in the cloud. The more we talk about it, the better off we are.
Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvatz. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FinOps in Action. Today, I have the privilege to have a very special guest whom I talked to multiple times in the past, and she finally agreed to join our podcast today. She has tons of experience with building financial models to tech investments, and in 2019, she did the move to cloud and FinOps. Since then, her company moved 99% to the cloud. I'm happy to welcome Head of Infrastructure, Cost Management, and Cloud FinOps at Citizens Bank, Amy Race. Amy, how are you today?
Hi, Alana. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
For sure, excited to have you here. First of all, congrats on this 99%. You obviously went through a significant journey.
Yep.
And since you went through such a journey, why don't I take you to the beginning of it and ask you to share with us what was that one thing that you got wrong when you started your FinOps journey?
I love when you asked me that question. I had to pinpoint the one thing that we did wrong. And there were many, many things that we did wrong or would have done differently. Maybe wrong is not the right word. But wrong, what we did was we didn't enforce our tagging strategy in the beginning. So I think a lot of us weren't quite familiar with how important the tagging strategy was to FinOps and where the ownership of that should lie. Does it lie with FinOps? Does it lie with cloud engineering? So we went and did some research and asked the FinOps Foundation, all those good places that you go for your information. And it turns out that it should sit within FinOps because it really does affect us. Now, the cloud engineering and DevOps team are the ones that help me enforce it. But we are really the ones affected when it wasn't working well. And in the beginning, that was our problem. We had no enforcement of the tagging strategy. So we knew exactly what things we wanted to tag. We wrote it up. We put it in our what we call our minimum requirements document and sent it out to everybody. But there was no way that we could enforce what an application ID looked like in the tag, as opposed to what it really meant to us. So we were faced with a bunch of data that just was a mess, and people were they weren't getting a new SysID for their cloud apps. So I couldn't research anything because it wasn't showing up in our system of record. So it was definitely not going well for a while. We don't do, I learned a lot recently being on the Connecticut FinOps meetup group that Point 5 also hosts. I talked to a couple of people there about how they do their tagging and strategies. And it turns out that when you have multiple accounts, it's easier to manage it because an application or a set of apps are sitting in one account. Well, we didn't set Amazon up that way. We had one giant account for everything for consumer, every one for commercial, one for EDO. So all of our groups. But then as we started getting bigger and doing this migration, we have hundreds of apps sitting inside these accounts, which was creating multiple issues with doing a show back. So that was definitely a problem. Then we decided to use our Sentinel policy to enforce it, but we started out in advisory. So it was just suggested that people do this, but you could still launch whatever you wanted and bypass the strategy. And then it took us a couple of years actually to get the right level of enforcement. And now we are 100%. You cannot launch anything in the cloud without having a valid, verified application ID, and then your application or your resources will launch in there. But we had a lot of cleanup to do, and we still have quite a few what turns out to be untagged resources that we do report out at the highest level. Every month we meet with all of our CIOs and go over all of our costs and where we have opportunities, what we're seeing in the cloud, where people are missing their forecast and their against their actuals, but the untagged spend still seems to be a sort of a crow just kind of sitting on us that we're still struggling to rectify. So it's definitely something in the FinOps world that is hard to manage, but enforcing it and making sure that it is a mandatory field is definitely helpful.
Absolutely. And I can tell that everyone struggles with that. And wow, I have so many questions, but I want to actually start with thanking you for sharing with us such an important topic. That is really a fundamental thing for FinOps. I often feel that people talk about AI all the time, but the reality is that for FinOps field, there are a lot things that are a lot more fundamental and important at the moment. I actually recently checked what is the percentage of spend on AI out of the total spend on the cloud. And for enterprises, it's like 2.5%. So
And we would probably even be less.
exactly. So everyone talks about it. It's still not a big deal. Tagging is a huge, huge topic and a huge, huge issue. So my first question is, when you're talking about the things you did wrong, you talked about strategy and enforcement. Do you feel like you also got the strategy wrong, or also, or only the enforcement?
I think it was mostly the enforcement. Our in the beginning when we first before I even was was granted the FinOps position. You know how we all ended up in our roles in FinOps. Somebody said, "Hey, somebody who can count, let's give them this job." So before I was even here, we were asking developers to provide our what we call RC, our cost center or responsibility center, and that's how we were tying back the cost. Nobody knows what their RC is. Like it's a number that if you're not in finance, you don't even know you have an RC. It doesn't mean anything to anybody else. So we were using this as the one key that would help us to align costs, but nobody knew. Nobody knew where to find it. No one knew what it was. And if they did put something in there, it wasn't accurate. And just because your RC is X doesn't mean that application rolls up to the same, higher level. So it was very useless. So that was before we really sat down and said, how do we really look at this? And it was me and some of my finance people that said, well, you were using this, this, and this, but that doesn't mean anything to us. Let's just focus here. Because what we did was we aligned that strategy, that application ID, with our application system of record. So then we could pull all of the other data associated with that application right from that system of record. So I want to say ServiceNow, but it we have two different systems, so it kind of goes to both of them. But that was the one thing that allowed us to then make that connection with the data in GRC, pull it in and map everything else that we needed. So there was no manual inputting. So we also had a problem. People were actually in the beginning putting in application names manually. So you had 19 applications with the same name. The spelling is atrocious. So yeah, it was just you have to automate that. If you can't automate that, your data is never going to be clean.
Fascinating. And I'm curious about the goals of your tagging strategy. So obviously there is a goal for show back, chargeback, so you can know how much you spend on application. Uh, did you also use tagging for other purposes? For example, attribution to a team, so you can tell who is the person in charge and who should take action and fix things?
Yes. So yeah, so two things. So the application owner information also came over. So now we have the tech manager and the app owner. Now for the most part, my team knows we have a point of contact for every department that has a set of apps in the cloud. So my team is relatively familiar with all of those people, but maybe that one app is one level more granular than we know. So, and again, we have a lot of applications in the cloud now. Again, when it was 100 and 200, simple to manage, right? But now at the numbers that we're looking at, it gets harder. But the other big thing was the support. So we have a DL in the support tag, but that didn't match the ServiceNow resolver group. So we had a bigger problem there when we had outages. we were struggling to find the application support group. So that
Mm.
was another one that became built into the strategy. It had to be a verified, and now we can verify the DLs that we're getting to make sure that they are actual support groups for those applications. That was a big problem. Rehydrating and or patching in place when I was responsible for that as well. It was difficult to find who the teams were to make sure that that work was done. And I don't know that that normally sits within FinOps, but I was cloud governance as well when we first started. So that was part of my remit. So yeah, so there were a bunch of things that our tagging strategy had to account for and solve.
Yeah, and that's actually a great insight that you have to align your tagging strategy with tagging in other platforms outside of the cloud because ServiceNow serve you to solve things in the cloud. So there has to be this alignment. I'm curious if it's actually very interesting that you got the responsibility as FinOps for cloud tagging because tagging is not only for FinOps. So it can also help security teams. It can also help DevOps. And I wonder if you found yourself aligning with security or other departments around how to build a tagging strategy and what tags to use exactly, and whether or not you see them actually use the tags that you help build the program for.
I will say I did not work with our CSNR team on the tagging strategy. I'm thinking back to all of the people. That was not one of the groups that I work with. We definitely worked with our cloud architects and engineers. I've turned this over to them now. So they've taken on, I was accountable for the whole minimum requirements. So everything that you had to do in order to first get into the cloud, I was responsible for that. But I've turned all of that over to our cloud onboarding and architecture team. So I think I've taken the onus off of the FinOps. We are still a contributing member of conversations that happen when we have to do a review. We do an annual review of all of our documentation. So when that happens, I am part of those conversations. But I've turned that back over to the cloud team now.
Nice. So actually sounds like, hey, you had a challenge with tagging. You were the one who was suffering the most out of it, more than the security folks or DevOps folks. You took responsibility, you made it happen, and then you roll it back to cloud governance. Is that accurate?
Yep, that sounds good. That's exactly it. Yep, come in, solve a problem, and hand it off.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I want everyone on my team to have the same approach, by the way. So kudos to you. So does that mean that you feel like taking responsibility should sit within Cloud Center of Excellence or DevOps versus FinOps? I'm talking like more ideally.
I do. I absolutely do. I wish we had a cloud center of excellence. And if we did, that's exactly where it would go. Our FinOps practice here at Citizens does reach many, many people. We are obviously, as everybody who's listening to this will know, we're the practitioners, but we do work with everyone. So that anything that I'm accountable for does have responsibility into many other areas. But I think that's where that cloud center of excellence is where those conversations are happening all the time. So I definitely think that that's where that should be sitting.
Awesome. And Amy, I'm now a FinOps person. I want to create from scratch or revamp my tagging strategy. What are the steps I need to make? Who I should talk to? And how do I take the first actions to make it consistent and scalable?
That's a great question. So you need to understand who else, any data that's generated from your reporting, from the cloud team reporting, from finances reporting, from anybody's reporting. How are people looking at this data and what does it mean to them? Like, what are the outcomes that they need to see? You need to understand all of what your possible tags are. We generally stick with the cost allocation tags. I guess that's because it's FinOps, but what there's other tags in there as well that you can use. But how does knowing that level of granularity or that level of data help anybody make decisions in the cloud? And so for us, we use tagging for Datadog monitoring and reporting as well. So we had to work with the observability team to make sure that the tags that they were able to translate into Datadog matched what we were doing. So we had consistency in our data. Again, I told you the big one, the EIM. So for our enterprise incident management team, being able to understand what the right teams were. So there was a lot of input from a lot of people now as we've grown to a much more mature organization. And then you just, for me, you have to document what you're doing. You have to get the buy-in, um, approval. We sent out multiple different iterations of spreadsheets, making sure that we got feedback from everybody, got their input, and then that we were able to utilize those tags, how they would come across, and making sure that the data was consistent. Manually inputting information in a tag is not a great idea. So you have to talk to your engineering team, who's we use Terraform for our code. So making sure that it's built into our code, making sure that our Sentinel policies are mandatory and not advisory. So everything is done and done at the beginning. Going back, as a lot of people will agree to this, in the cloud world, in the FinOps world, in the cloud governance, going back and doing something is much harder than doing it right from the beginning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing such practical advice about tagging. It's long overdue on this podcast. Now, Amy, from past conversations we had, I know that you're really big on top-down support for FinOps and the importance for that. Can you share with us your journey to get this top-down executive support for the FinOps program?
Sure. I do 100% believe if you do not have top of the house, not only support, but you need day to day or month to month, you need somebody at the top to be sitting on these calls and making sure that the directive is getting heard by the people who can execute in the cloud. We all know that when we change the strategy from buying hardware, handing it to an engineer and saying, so we would build the business case, we would buy the equipment, we would hand it to someone and they would build it. They never got involved with pricing or cost or anything. Changing that mentality, the way that we did here at Citizens with this migration that we're doing to cloud was huge for our engineers to understand. So if we don't have that top down to say, you now need to focus on optimization, value, efficiency in the cloud, the people that are hands on the keyboard, they're not going to focus on it. They're into now, we're into innovation and the sexy things and the bot here and the this there. They're not going to want to go back and say, oh, wait, I could save X if I just change this. But once you hear the impact of the overall cloud budget to the success of our P&L, you really can put those two things together. So our CIO sits on a call with us every month and he understands everything that's going on. He's talking to the people, he's supporting my team and making sure that people are looking at this. We have a cute little leaderboard. So it looks like a little platform from the Olympics, the gold and the silver. So we have efficiency scores, we have the most optimized apps, and we give out awards for it. And everyone loves that. That's like the last 5 or 10 minutes of the call after everyone's getting yelled at for not doing their optimizations. So everybody loves that part of it. Everybody loves a winner. So if you're the most optimized application, even if you were that because you did something wrong in the beginning, but paying attention to it now and focusing on making those changes is huge in our industry, right? And then we'll take whatever we've done for one app or one set of resources and say, what can we do across the organization? If we did that here, it didn't have a negative effect and the application teams are happy, the end customers are happy. Can we take those learnings and apply them anywhere else in our environment? So we're always looking at it, take the small scale and then bring it out.
Fascinating. And was it easy to get a CIO on a monthly cadence meeting?
At the time, he had another boss who we've we reorged. So that boss of his, she was the head of business services. She's no longer there in that role, but she was the one that started this when she started to see the budget variance really getting bigger in cloud. And she had no idea about it or what was going on, but she started to look at it. And then he did, and he got really involved because he's the technology leader at the time, still is, and he took her lead on that, and he just continued. And no, I do have trouble getting other leaders on, but every month he is on that call. He almost never reschedules it unless there's a major thing. No, he is 100% supportive of those calls, and that has changed. I definitely that's changed the perspective of our DevOps teams, and now people want to come in and want to work with us. It's become more of a give and take in our world rather than in the beginning, it was us, it was my team always reaching out. Now I have people coming to us saying, what do you think if we do this? How will this affect the cost if we make this change? We saw this in the cloud visualization tools. How do you think that will affect the pricing? And we'll go in or we'll do the analysis for them. We'll get the right people on the call so they can go ahead and make those changes. It's definitely helped us huge.
Nice. It sounds like what moved the needle was the variance of the cloud spend. So it wasn't like, hey, necessarily we have a lot of waste or something like that. It was more around, hey, we need to put it under control. So we need the buy-in of the relevant executive. Is that the way you went about it?
Yeah, we were really forecasting high for the first couple of years, so we were coming in lower, doing optimizations, getting our savings plan and RI strategy down solid. So we knew we were getting the most savings there as well. But we were always coming in under budget until about our third or fourth year in the cloud when the migration really started to hit. And I think a lot of the people who were involved in that work were still on thinking on prem and didn't really understand the impact of moving this application and running it in the cloud in a DR environment in multiple AZs. They didn't understand how that would affect the cost. So we started to run a little higher than we were forecasting. I mean, it wasn't FinOps forecasting, it's the application team's forecasting. We're just the reporters, right? Um, but we could clearly see that there was a lot of education needed. So we started to do a lot of that as well. Lunch and learns on FinOps. We created a FinOps badge now. So you have to be certified FinOps within our organization. We have something called the Infrastructure Academy. So now FinOps is a huge part of that as well. So we're always trying to promote it and help people understand how what they're building and doing in the cloud, how that literally affects our budget.
That's really cool. And how do you get a Finos badge at Citizens Bank today?
You have to take the training, and it all comes back to us. We created it. We took some learnings from the FinOps organization. We did some of our own material. You have to go in and create reports. You have to be able to find information in our tools, run your reports, create your dashboards, understand what you're looking at, take right sizing recommendations, and execute. We're doing a development day coming up where we'll talk for 90 minutes on FinOps, and we'll do actual right sizing right there on the call. So hopefully it'll go well. The more we talk about it, the better off we are.
And honestly, sounds like doing FinOps at Citizens is really, really fun. You have winners, you have badges, you have medals. Sounds like fun, honestly.
It's a good practice that we've set up here. I'm very proud of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you talked about the executive buy-in, you took it mostly to optimization and efficiency of the infrastructure. Do you feel it's also important for tagging, for example?
Tagging is one of our efficiency scores. So how you rank in your efficiency is dependent on how accurate your tagging is as well. So it does all play into it.
So why don't you share with us what are the other components of efficiency in your score?
Well, we're revamping one of them. So, auto scaling if you were auto scaling, spot, but we had to take that one out. We had a few I'll call them hiccups with Spot, where instances were reclaimed by AWS at a very inopportune moment in our data organization, and they are very hesitant now. And that was the most, the one area that was using Spot the most. So tagging, Spot, auto scaling, Lambdas if you're using Lambda, but we're not a huge Lambda shop as well. And then scheduling. So what we now refer to as hibernation. So we had a way that we could tell from a tag what applications were scheduled, and you could create your own schedule. It didn't have to align with everybody else's. But then we started to do hibernation, and that's not set on the same tag. So now we have to go back in and figure out how we do our hibernation reporting to show, because that really is, we have auto hibernation now. So you can click the button or click your resource and get your resources to launch again pretty much immediately. I'll say it's about a couple of minutes to get it to launch. So that's a big one. So now we have to use that in place of the schedule tag in our formula that creates our efficiency score.
That's really, really cool. Really cool. And I'm sure your engineers are having a lot of fun with all of these scores and badges and medals.
I think they're having a lot of fun with pipelines and creating different ways to automate all of this. So makes it easier for everybody. So that's how we got a lot of. We're going to start working on an um, auto right sizing as well, using our new pipeline that they're building as well. So lots of good stuff happening here.
Nice, nice. Cool. Wow, Amy, thank you for sharing with us such practical advice on such fundamental topics, tagging, top-down support. I learned a lot and got a lot of insights. I'm sure our listeners as well. And I'm also sure that our listeners would love to learn more about you on the personal level as well, not only professionally. So, Amy, today you live in Connecticut. You mentioned the Connecticut meetup, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
How did you get to Connecticut?
So I live in East Lyme, Connecticut. So to me, it's out in the middle of nowhere. I grew up in New York, and then lived on in New Jersey for 14 years. And I met my husband. He lived here in Connecticut, and he had an 8-year-old son when I met him. And I knew if we got married, we'd end up here in Connecticut. And so that's what happened. And
And you dated him nonetheless.
yes, I no, I didn't actually. I said, "I won't date you, but if you wanna get married, we can do that," and he said, "Okay," and we were married 2 months later. I am not
Oh, wow.
kidding.
Wow.
That was Valentine's Day, and then we got married in May. We got engaged in March and married in May. So and it's been almost 18 years now.
Wow. Wow. Incredible. Wow, what a
Gotta know
crazy
what
story.
you want.
100%, 100%. You look definitely like the person who knows what he wants. Okay, nice. And living in Connecticut, what do you like to do outside of FinOps for fun?
So I am a golfer. So back there on my wall is all my pictures. That is Ireland when we went and played golf in Ireland, and the rest is really from Hilton Head. So we do our winters in Hilton Head and play golf, and we play golf as much as we possibly can. That's what our life is. I cook. I love to cook. I love to feed people, have people over, make food and deliver it to people. Anyone who's hungry. So I'm either cooking, golfing, or working. That's what I do.
That's great. And I think our listeners already know, but I've never played golf.
Never.
Like I've never played golf. Like I played top golf. I don't think it's considered golf, but I've never played golf. And interestingly enough, there's only one golf court in Israel where I live, and it's literally 2 minutes from my house. 2 minutes, literally. But I've never played. So, Amy, you have the responsibility to convince me why it's a lot of fun.
I think
Eh,
I'm going to. There's a Top Golf right by my office. We can go there and hit some balls and see how we think you'll do.
Okay, let's do
All
it.
right,
Maybe I'm a
perfect.
natural. Who knows?
You never know. Absolutely. I am not a natural. It was a very long struggle for me to learn how to play golf. And I'm still learning. Every day is a learning.
And you still love it. which is great. I think
Yes.
that it's very easy to love things you're very good at. It's not easy to love things that you're not good at, and also stay consistent. Exactly, and be consistent on it. That means a lot about your character, by the way. So that's really cool.
Thank you.
So Amy, I also have one thing I ask my guests, and that is a movie or book they recommend and what they learn from it. So do you have anything like that to share with us?
So I do. I have one book that I read. Actually, I read thousands of books. I read all the time. But from a leadership perspective, I read a book called An American Icon. And it is the story of Alan Mulally, who came in and saved the Ford Motor Company after the Fords kind of drove it to the ground, and how he changed the entire auto industry out in the Midwest, single-handedly, pretty much. And I just love his story and how he took this very impersonal, cold, hierarchical world, very non-transparent, siloed environment, and turned it into an open, free-thinking, opinions matter, people matter, he mattered, everyone mattered, being right didn't matter, trying mattered, and the way that he turned that company around, to me, was just inspirational. I loved that book.
Incredible. Wow, I feel like I have to read it right now.
I think you should. I think you will enjoy it. I really
Okay.
do.
And I have a lot of action items from today's episode.
Oh, good.
Golfing, reading American Icon. I need to get straight to it. Need to get straight to it. Cool. Amy, that was fascinating and phenomenal. I'm sure many of our listeners would love to ask you more questions. How would you recommend them to reach out if they have any question?
Guess you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name on LinkedIn is Amy Jacobs Race. I never took out my maiden name from there.
Yeah, LinkedIn is absolutely great. I'm sure people reach out to you. I honestly want to thank you again for getting us back to the fundamentals and also to the details around implementing tagging. I don't think we've ever gotten into like this level of detail, and I think the tips you shared will be really, really instrumental for all of our listeners. And one takeaway that I have on top of that is, hey, make FinOps fun, you know,
Yep.
give medals, do competitions, do lunch and learns. So all this is great, and FinOps should be fun. Okay, FunOps. Maybe we should call it FunOps, actually.
Oh, look at you. You just coined a new phrase.
I guess so.
Very nice.
Cool. So, Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about what you're passionate about.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it very much. I'm sure our listeners enjoyed it very much. And I also want to thank them for joining us, listening through the end of the episode. I'm sure you had a lot of fun, at least as much as I do. Don't forget, like you always do, tell your friend about the podcast. We want to get more people listening in. Amy, thank you again. This has been another fun, exciting, fascinating episode of FinOps in Action. Hope to see you all next time. That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with tip detection and remediation tools that drive action.